Hello, my name is Evan Rhodes, and today I want to talk to you about solving the single parent crisis in America. Now, you may be wondering, what is the single parent crisis? Well, according to the CDC, National Center for Health Statistics, a very reputable source, the amount of children born outside of wedlock in America is increased from under 5%, less than 5%, to over 40% since 1940. That's 7 times the original percentage in just less than 80 years. To visualize that, we have a graph here, and you can see how the national percentage has steadily risen. You'll also notice discrepancies in how this affects certain races, and we'll get to that later. But we also see that most children are born out of wedlock, or who are born out of wedlock, are cared for by single mothers. There's a very low amount who are cared for by single fathers or cohabiting parents. Actually, about 1 in 5 children in the US are living with a single mother, according to the Pew Research Center. We have a graph to visualize that as well. This is rapidly increased. Again, 1968, 85% of children lived with married parents. Now, 65%. That's a 20% drop in a country with over 300 million people. And we can see that solo mothers are taking up the vast amount, the majority of that, that single mother, a single parenthood. And so, we ask, well, why does it matter? What are the effects of this crisis? Well, Pew has also found that 30% of solo mothers and their families are living in poverty when only 8% of married couples are living in poverty, even with kids. So this obviously has a huge economic impact. According to the American Prospect, there are a wealth of negative effects on children from being born in single parent families. Now, this is a generalization, so it's not true for all. There are some really incredible people who have grown up in single parent families, like Ben Carson or even Obama. They both grew up under single mothers. But these are effects that are measurable. So children who grow up with only one of their biological parents are twice as likely to drop out of high school, 2.5 times as likely to become teen mothers themselves, and 1.4 times as likely to be out of school and out of work, so without any income or any really path forward. They also tend to have lower grade point averages, lower college aspirations, and poorer attendance records. And as adults, they have higher rates of divorce, and the average drop in income for children whose parents separate during the child's adolescence, so when they're younger, like my parents did, is 30 to 40%. So obviously this has a huge impact on the children who are living in these households. Again, generalization, but in general, these things have a huge impact on kids growing up. So some other effects include that when parents live apart, since it is often a single mother who is taking the children tend to see their fathers a lot less. They don't have a father figure around. About 29% do not see them at all, and another 35% see them only on a weekly basis, which is around about where I was at. My parents divorced, and I was seeing my dad 2 or 3 days a week, which is actually more than most get. And obviously this has significant negative effects. When you don't have a father figure, you don't have someone to teach you a lot of things that you need to learn in order to just be successful. And you don't have that connection with a male figure either that is sometimes necessary. The number of abortions also increases based on single motherhood rates. So we can see here that, as we saw in that previous graph, there were discrepancies between races, and whites had a very low amount of single motherhood. Well, they also have a very low amount of abortions, because obviously the more single motherhood you have, the more women want to make their lives easier and have an abortion, which, as Christians, we of course should absolutely, not support in any fashion. But as we can see, again, this has a significant effect, and it's specific. Well, it's not specific to race, but it does have a significant effect on certain races, and that is really unfortunate. So obviously I'll be talking about how we can contend with that moving forward. as you can see here, nearly half of Black children live with a solo mother. And that is staggering given the effects I told you about before. I mean, this has a significant impact on the African American community. And you can see it's mostly mothers. Again, not many cohabiting parents, not many solo fathers. Mostly mothers are shouldering the brunt of this. And this, in some ways, shows why some of the race and gender gap is there, partially, largely actually due to these factors with solo motherhood. So as I said, these statistics disproportionately affect minority groups, besides Asians, who actually have the lowest rate of single motherhood. Because African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans have a much higher than average rate of single motherhood and births out of wedlock. And this is just a travesty. So we're going to be talking about how we can move past that. So in doing so, in finding a solution, I've chosen the rational choice theory as my theoretical orientation. And the rational choice theory says that it's the idea that people make their decisions based on what they believe fulfills their individual needs and desires. So they look at, what do I want and what's the best way to get that? And I'm not saying these needs or desires are always healthy. Of course, often they're not, but they're trying to get what they want in the most efficient way possible. So those needs and desires vary from person to person, largely based on their experiences, their upbringing. You know, there are many factors that go into that. But the reason I chose this theory is because it allows us to look specifically at why individuals are making the choices that they are making and why they're doing what they're doing. And hopefully we can go from the individual, the micro level, up to the macro level as we take a closer look at this. This theory also allows solutions that seem rational and dictated by changing the logic around what people or how people make their decisions. And we can take clear steps which impact individuals and radiate out, instead of steps that are too big or not really concrete enough to address the root of the problem. So let's look at some of those potential solutions. Well, I've come up with 3 different potential solutions that could help us in this fight. So establishing a mentorship program so that children of single parents can have healthy relationships with father or mother figures that they aren't getting at home is really important. The impact of not having that relationship with an older mother figure or an older father figure or just an older mentor figure, especially when often single mothers or single fathers are working a lot in order to keep their family out of poverty. And so they often don't get much time with their kids. And so these kids need, I can speak partially from my own experience, these kids need a sort of mentor figure who's there for them. We also really need to get these statistics and this information out to schools and classrooms and to students so that they understand the impact these things are having. Show students the impact of having kids out of wedlock. Show the impact that, if their parents did that, the impact it has on them, and let's change their idea of doing that so that they understand the impact it can have on their lives and on their children's lives. And hopefully that will encourage relationships that are committed and last, and relationships that don't result in births out of wedlock, if people are able to see the effects that can have. Also, I think this is a no-brainer, and I'm not sure why no one's done this, but we need to offer relationship counseling to high school students. Many of us had relationships in high school. Very few of them turned out well. And I just think this seems like an obvious step that could be taken to decrease the number of children growing up in single-parent households, especially since a significant amount of single-parent households happen because of early divorces or early births around the teen years, or shortly into your 20s. And so getting that information out to people, establishing a mentorship program that helps people have those relationships with older figures, and then also establishing counseling for students who are in relationships so they understand the risks of these things, and so that they can hopefully have a successful relationship that is based not around sex, not around lust and desire, but around things that are going to carry them forward into a successful marriage, and hopefully marriage and eventually life as they move out of high school and into the rest of their lives. So these solutions connect to my theory. They fit the rational choice theory because they attempt to tackle the issue at the root of the problem, the individual, and why the individual is making the choices that they are. It's doing that by making it clear how harmful having children out of wedlock and becoming a single parent can potentially be. So it has helping people to see the consequences of their potential actions. And it's making this clear both to the parents and their children, hopefully changing behavior based on this new information for students that should hopefully be making their decisions based on rationale. At least that's according to this theory that I'm attempting to use. So these solutions also provide resources in the forms of relationship counseling and mentoring that can help promote healthy relationships and births in committed relationships rather than in relationships where the mother or the father will leave. And like I've discussed, those have very detrimental impacts on those mothers and fathers and on their children. And hopefully in doing so, we can stop the single parent cycle. As I said before, teens with single parents are 2.5 times as likely to become single parents themselves. So these solutions are aimed at putting an end to that negative cycle that disproportionately affects minority groups and contributes largely to the race and gender gap. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to put some of these solutions into action and that you'll help me fight for them as we move forward. These are my works cited. All of my works are from very reputable sources, most actually more left-leaning than right-leaning, even though I'm a more right-leaning politically. But many of them are from government agencies and government-run tests that are more objective, and so you know that you can trust my numbers. Thank you for listening, and I hope this makes a difference in the way you think about single motherhood and the way you think about single parenting in general. Thank you.